Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll kick off our meeting, the first one of the new year. Happy New Year to all. I'm going to take the chair position until Mr. Paul Cronus, our chairman, arrives. Let me start by reading the preamble to our meeting. It'll give you the information that you need. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustments. This is a meeting to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act of Ontario. Please keep in mind that the intent of this process is to review the proposal that is before us, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the committee, after consultation with the Secretary-Treasurer, will set a new hearing date. No further notice will be provided unless there are changes to the application. In order to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following processes. First, the owner and the authorized agent will be given the opportunity, if so desired, to briefly explain to us the basis of their application and answer any questions that may arise out of the hearing. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for this presentation. You need to state your full name and address for the record. Any materials submitted to the committee for viewing will remain the property of this committee. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All persons attending the hearing who wish to support or oppose the application must also state your full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chairperson of the committee. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will also be at the discretion of the committee. If there are several speakers sharing the same view, please select a spokesperson to present the group's opinion. We do want to hear your views, however, covering the same point will not advance your case. The owner or agent will then be provided for a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the owner or agent has any concerns found in staff reports, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the time and opportunity to advise us. The matter will be then taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussions. Once the committee makes an oral decision, any person desiring a copy must file with the Secretary-Treasurer at this meeting a written request for notice of the decision. A green sheet is provided for this purpose. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Municipal Board for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 for consent. To the applicant, the owner, an agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the last day of appeal of the decision to the Ontario Municipal Board will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant through written correspondence. People attending this committee meeting are to be courteous to and respectful to the members of the committee, town staff, and other people in attendance tonight. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed and available for future viewing on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca/live. We ask you that you turn cellular phones off and switch off to silent mode at the bare minimum, because these do tend to interfere with the audio system. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And our chairman is here, so my reign has been cut very short.
You can continue. Thank you. Thank you for reading that. There are no regrets this evening. Is there anyone with a declaration of any pecuniary interest? See none. If there's anything that arises during the course of the hearing, you can just advise. Is there anyone here this evening that wishes to request a deferral withdrawal of an application? Sir? Come forward.
Is on.
Oh, there you go.
We got it.
No.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, David Nelson, Ruth Victor and Associates, 481 North Service Road West, Oakville. I'm here with respect to item A003, that's 4268 4th line, and we are requesting a deferral. We're seeking further information from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. They have been in touch with us and with staff, and we're trying to get some clarification on an issue.
Okay, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 0032, 2017 at 4268 Fourth Line? Okay, so I guess this is the one that's involved with zoning orders and all that, is that the?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Sure, I think that would help. Members, any comments, questions? All support the deferral request? Saying, okay, sir, we'll defer it. Is there a date that's been selected for this?
No, I think it's a matter of trying to get the clarification, and that will drive
Okay.
our date.
So we'll leave it open. We won't assign a peremptory date to allow you to work through that process. There'll probably be new notice required. And then you can work together with the Secretary Treasurer. We'll get another date. So this matter is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to adjourn or defer an application? Sorry, adjourn, defer, or withdraw? Okay, seeing none. We'll start with our very first application, CAVA 001 2017 at 469 Sadmere Place. CAVA 001 2017 469 Sadmere Place. Yes, sir. Okay, are you here? Okay, well, come on forward. This is your application?
I have an architect, and I think he did the
Forgot.
application. Architect, my architect.
Yes, your architect. And did you expect your architect to be here to
Well,
represent
I
it?
don't know. He didn't
Would you
tell-
like us to hold this down so you can make a phone call? Or you wish to proceed with your application? Are you comfortable to proceed?
Well, I was hoping he's gonna do it.
Okay,
But
why don't we do this? Why don't we give you an opportunity to just step out in the room there? We'll just defer it. Once you come back, I'll consider it, and you let us know whether you can get in touch with your architect. Maybe he's stuck in traffic.
Okay, thank
Like
you.
both myself and Mr. Tulowski were probably.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we'll just hold this down for a second. We'll deal with application CAVA 002 2017 at 36 Birmingham Drive. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Treasurer. My name is Richard Mann. I'm the architect for the owners at 36 Birmingham.
Okay, thank you. Just before we proceed with the presentation, staff are recommending approval subject to conditions. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in the application? Okay. Sir, you're in support, opposition, or you're here to? Information. So why don't you give us, sir, a quick presentation, and then we'll ask the gentleman to share his concerns or thoughts with us. Thank you.
No problem. The application before you today is a redesign of a previously approved application from last year. What I'd like to do is just kind of explain to you why we're here again. In the previous application, my clients had requested a side entry garage, which requires a 7-meter side yard setback. This effectively reduces the building envelope width on the property and created a deeper dwelling for the similar size that we have now. After we got approval, we reviewed the placement of the house and the porch and the extension on the site and realized that it compromised the rear yard too much. So we came up with an alternate design that had a traditional front-facing garage, which allowed us to make the house wider and not as deep. So this design, this iteration of the design is very similar in size. It's slightly smaller. It has less coverage than the previous one, and also doesn't have any requirement for the dwelling depth because we now have more width. I've reviewed the planning staff's comments and assessment and concur, and feel that this design actually is more appropriate than the previous one, and I apologize that we're sort of taking the long route to get there, but here we are. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Members, you have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Charlevoix.
Just got one question actually for planning. For my edification, I mean, the variances were exactly the same ones that we did approve, and there were some that were dropped. I was just wondering why it had to come back again.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee member, that's a great question. Based on the way that the applications get approved by this committee, subject to the condition that they are in accordance with the plans as submitted,
Okay.
the design of the dwelling is no longer in accordance with those plans previously submitted, and as such, a new application would be required to ensure that you would be satisfied with that revised design.
Okay, that's fine, okay. I thought so. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Mann, if you can have a seat nearby. Sir? If you please register your name and address for the record, and then share your thoughts.
Carlo Rachopo. I currently live at 229 Hanover Street, but I own the property next door at, I guess it's 28 Berringham. If I understood the application correctly, you're moving the house forward, correct? Same location, just not as deep. Well, the house is not as deep. Okay, so I misread that.
Sorry.
Didn't quite understand it. That's all I had to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to application CAV 002-2017? Okay, members, ready for recommendation on this? Who would like to move a recommendation? Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
we've seen this application before and had approved it. And I do agree that I think the revisions are even better. Not that the last one wasn't. And on that basis, I find that, I should mention, taking into account the one question that did come from the public, and I think we dealt with that one. I find that this application does meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I recommend that it be approved, subject to the condition that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted, and further, subject to the condition that the approval will expire 2 years from the date of this decision if the proposed development does not proceed or a building permit is not issued.
thank you. Discussion on recommendation? See none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application being approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, did you get an answer from your architect? Yes, I did. You want to come forward, let us know?
He's not gonna come,
Okay.
but he said I can present my,
All right,
as the
well,
owner.
why don't we proceed on that basis then?
Okay,
Okay, we're
thank you.
dealing with now application CAVA 001-2017 at 469 Sandmere Place. If you can again re-register your name and address for the record.
My name is Romuald Karakiewicz. I'm the owner of the house.
469 Sandmere Place?
469 Sandmere Place. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Just before you proceed on any presentation, is anyone here this evening that has an interest in this application, CAVA 001-2017 at 469 Sandmere Place? No, none. Members, do you have any questions, any items of clarification? All right, sir, do you have anything to add to the application? We've done our site visit, read the reports, familiar with the application.
Everything what is on the
Okay,
paper
then we'll proceed on
stays.
a recommendation. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act, noting that there is nobody from the public to speak to this application, and make that approval subject to development proceeding in general accordance with the drawings provided, and that a permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. And discussion on recommendation? See none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application being approved, sir.
Thank you very
Good
much.
thing your architect didn't come, you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. I will talk to
CAVA
him.
004-2017 at 263 Westdale Road.
Good evening. My name is Peter Druzik. I'm the architect on the project. My address is 60 Thistledown Crescent, Whitby, Ontario. I'm the agent regarding the project. This project has been through planning comments, and we've, in consultation with my client, we've done some modifications to the dwelling, which would remove variance number 1 and 2, which is the garage. So by just being able to push the garage further back, we can bring it into compliance for the garage projection and the front yard setback to 12.35. For that. However, we are here before you still requesting the requirement for the balcony and the height variance.
Have you had the opportunity to discuss these changes with staff?
No, I haven't. I brought plans. It was just pushing the garage into the dwelling itself. I know the planning department had concerns about that projection. They didn't like that projection. So.
Well, they also don't support variance 3 and 4.
Well, the balcony I'd like to address myself here. I understand their concerns.
Okay, so what we'll do is, just before you proceed, is there anyone else here this evening that wishes to speak to this application, CAVA 004-2017 at 263 Westdale Road? Okay, members, are you satisfied? If we're gonna accept this revised application on the fly, we're just making sure, members, you satisfied to proceed with the revised application, eliminating variance 1 and 2? Can you put that
The dwelling up?
the drawing up? See where it says place document?
Yep, I see that.
Yeah. Okay, okay, is that the one that, okay, you
That's the
pushed,
site plan.
right?
So we've, this is now the revised site plan. So this dimension right here, it used to be 11 point, I don't know where the lights are shining here. Let's see if I can give you some more light here.
We'll zoom it up, that's fine, we'll zoom it in.
It used to be the 11.08, and by pushing that dimension right there to the 12.35, all we did was take, I can show you the actual architectural plans, what we did.
It pushes the garage into the house.
Yeah, so all we did in this instance here, this jog right here.
Yes.
This closet was more here, we just pushed it in. So
Okay.
it was just it was an easy fix for those two variances. If that was a vote
right,
in contention,
then
we were
we'll-
able to do that simply here and bring those two into compliance.
All right, then we'll proceed on the basis of the revised application, on your dropping variance 1 and 2, so it's
Okay.
always useful if we go the right direction rather than trying to ask for more.
No, absolutely,
Okay, so we'll
absolutely.
proceed with the revised application, so go ahead.
Now, in terms of the request for height and the balcony issue, our dwelling currently is here. So I've been before this committee before regarding balcony issues, and I understand the need for privacy. This is an entire park back here where we've had it. Now, I was the architect of record actually to this neighboring house as well, and I was before the committee here for that dwelling, which permitted this balcony here, which is much larger in extent than the current. So this is the neighboring property balcony that was built about 3 years ago. And we were before the committee of the same issue, and the committee made the same decision that the fact that we are facing a back forest area, that they didn't see a concern in terms of the issue of privacy to the neighbors, as there is no neighbors at the rear. Now we do have a letter of support from that neighbor itself regarding it. Now the neighbor to the left over here, if I put it to the balcony issue there, that neighbor is totally isolated from the balcony, as our master bedroom does extend beyond it. So this balcony that we're proposing back here is just facing the forested area, not this neighbor here or anything off the main street there. This balcony in itself is a little bit less actually intrusive than the one that was approved by committee before on the neighboring property that was just sticking out in the rear fully, and was much larger in nature than the one we're proposing here today. I believe that the fact that we are facing the rear yard, which is a park, a city-owned park, nature area there, and there's no issue regarding a neighbor's privacy at the rear, and we do have letter of support there. We also had a discussion, and we're going to introduce a privacy screening just down here, just in case there is any concern. We'll put a privacy screening lattice work on that one to even further mitigate. The neighbor doesn't have any concerns with that, with our balcony there, but as a good faith gesture, we're going to put a privacy screen just there to mitigate it. So the view of the balcony is fully of the park in the rear. In terms of the height issue, we're just requesting an extra 0.3. We do have some issues regarding that when we went for permit for regarding skylights and whatnot, so that extra 0.3. It will help us regarding the roof lines there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? See none, okay, we'll take this matter. Again, is there anyone here have an interest in application CAV 004-2017 at 263 Westdale Road? See none, okay, we'll take this matter into committee. So we're dealing with the revised application, members, the elimination of variance 1 and 2, and we're dealing with the balconies and the height only.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move a motion.
Okay, please proceed.
I will note that there are no objections from the public and that the applicant has provided a letter of support from the neighboring property that is most affected by his request for the balcony as per items 3 and 4. Given his design elements, I'm comfortable that there are no negative impacts on either properties, and the fact that it does face back onto park lands. I'm going to move a motion to approve this application as amended, removing variants 1 and 2 and approving variants 3 through 6. I do feel that they have met the 4 tests, and it is desirable for the development of the land.
Okay, thank you. Just a suggestion, do you think there's a, yeah, Mr. Charleroi, I'll let you finish first. Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were going to ask for any comments on that.
Well, any discussion on the recommendation?
Yeah. I was just going to add that we actually did get a last-minute complaint that was from the neighbor at 271 Westdale Road, which is right next door. And I'm just reading through it now, and they are complaining that the balcony would affect their privacy. I'm just trying to get into that, but I know that they're not here. No, it just came in at the last second.
Do you have? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was buried. It was stapled to a bunch of things.
Okay.
So that's sort of what I was going to suggest, is whether moving that recommendation, Ms. Mikhail, that you considered the offer made by the agent to install a privacy screen on the, I guess, north side.
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman. I will accept that amendment to the proposed motion, given the letter that we have before us. So we'll make that subject to 2 conditions: that the approval will expire within 2 years if the date of the decision has not, the development has not proceeded, and/or a building permit not approved, as well as, Kate, help us out here in terms of the terminology that you want to use for the condition for the screening.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee member, to be frank, the complaint that was received in writing is for the neighbor to the north. The screening would be proposed onto the southerly side, which, in my opinion, absolutely has no impact to protect any view to the property to the north, based on the plan that we have received to date. So unless the applicant's plan has changed as a result of removing variances 1 and 2, pushing the balcony beyond that northerly face of the wall,
Right.
the balcony is not in
But he's
view of
totally
the north
screened,
side.
right?
Right.
The
Thanks for
north.
that. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. If you look at, sir, can you
Yeah.
put that?
Yeah, I was going to have it ready for you guys.
So the property we're looking at is to our left, right?
Okay.
It's on the
Yeah,
main
so the balcony is screened by the master bedroom, and you are offering a screening on the other side for the neighbor at
For the neighbors that
255,
support.
Okay.
which doesn't do anything.
So
The master bedroom extends 9 feet further beyond the balcony
Right,
to
okay.
screen from the neighbor.
in that case, then we don't
Yes.
need to amend the motion. I'm
No.
from the designs before us, I'm quite confident that that neighbor to the north is fully screened. Perhaps the letter of objection has come from him prior to seeing the design. Has the neighbor to the north seen your design? Are you aware of any?
My client approached him and discussed the whole project with them, and we were kind of surprised that he did submit this. We
Okay.
thought he was going to be in support of it, and then he submitted this letter in itself. I don't know if he's seen this. This was part of probably the package that was sent out, but we did actually have a meeting with him. Our clients did have a meeting with him and showed him that there's no impact to it. I know he had an issue regarding height of the building, but I think that request for the 1 foot, for his pool
Okay, we're
or the
not going to
building-
re-argue
yeah.
it. You had a
I
simple
understand.
question? Okay, thank you.
Okay, in that case, perhaps you
So your
can reach out to them
recommendation
and,
is-
yeah.
Your recommendation is to approve subject to the two conditions?
Yes.
Well, it's a substantial conformity with the plans.
The plans are submitted because we are
Plans
receiving
that-
new
what
plans
date- What
right
date are your
now.
plans, sir? We haven't seen those plans.
I submitted a copy of them.
These are November 16 plans?
Yeah, I didn't update the date on the revision. I should have updated them, but they did provide the new date to them. I can write that in on the plan if you'd like, or
Yes, if you
Mrs.
can write it
McCray.
and initial it, then we'll date it.
She has a copy of it
Yeah,
in
we'll write
records.
it, initial it, and we'll date it for,
My apologies, Mr. McCray.
yeah. Ms. McCray's name
Ms. McCray,
is,
my apologies.
Ms. McCray, and she's our secretary treasurer.
Don't have my glasses on me. Okay, so
So, okay, your motion is to approve, subject to the condition that the proposed, proposal be in compliance with the plan submitted, dated today, and subject to the 2-year condition. Okay, any
Yes, Mr.
discussion on
Chairman.
recommendation? See none, all those in support? Anyone opposed? See none, that's been approved, subject to those 2 conditions. Thank you.
very
We'll
much for your
proceed to
time.
application CAVA 005-2017, 134 Biller Road, yes? It's subject to those 2 conditions and dated today. Revised application, 1 and 2 not approved or deleted. Approved,
Plans received today?
received and dated today, yes. And our other condition. Okay, who's here on application CAVA 005-2017 at 134 Miller Road?
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Hani Kalini is the agent for this property.
Yes, Mr. Kalini, let's just see, okay, we'll need a presentation on this, if you can proceed.
Okay, so we're here seeking just additional few square footage to be added to the GFA. This layout design, we managed to meet all the bylaws. Actually, we managed to exceed the frontage and side and rear setbacks. There is no requirement for the height, and we stayed within the allowable bylaws pretty much, or exceed the requirements. The only part that we couldn't meet is the GFA. And I can see the town comments that they actually acknowledge that we maintain the front yard setbacks and we're not projecting into established rear yard of any of the neighbors, but they do recommend denying based on we're not providing generous side setback. So the zoning bylaw is asking for 1.2 meter and we're providing 1.5, so I think we're over and beyond the minimum required side setbacks. And in terms of the massing, I mean, we stayed within the 9-meter height required, and we actually planned the house specifically so the front looks as more of a 1-story house, more than 2-story home. So the front of the house is basically 1 level, and the second floor is pushed further back. So the house actually will look in harmony with the neighborhood. And the only part that actually extends to the setbacks is the garage, which is a very minor adjustment to the project. If we need to bring the garage back, and then we have a very generous setback, if that was the only comment from the city, that's something we can do easily.
Okay.
Here.
Thank you for that. Just, is there any questions of Mr. Halini, is it? Sorry? Mr. Kalini, yes.
Sir, have you had a chance to read the letters of objection that came
Yes,
from
I
the
just went
public?
through it, yes.
Yeah, okay. I'd just like to just ask you again to perhaps concentrate on the thing that they're saying, which was basically that this particular building doesn't conform in and doesn't transition well from, with respect to the rest of the buildings. Can you tell me, as you're the architect, aren't you?
Yes.
Tell me in your opinion why you feel this building does slide in well and does transition well from the other buildings or the other homes in this area?
Okay, that's exactly the point. When I drove first around in the area and I saw all the houses, the neighboring are 1-story homes. The whole plan was is to create a house that fit in the fabric of this area. That's how we planned the mass of the house, that the front portion of the house is actually only 1 story, which is this corner, and just the garage. And you can see the second story is pushed further back in. We know the bylaws allow us to build 2 stories, so we took advantage of the bylaws, and it gave us 9-meter height, so we're at the 9 meter, actually below the 9-meter maximum height required. The bylaws also gave us the 1.2 meter setbacks, and we're at 1.5 meter setbacks, so we're exceeding the minimum required by the city. And we cited the plan on the lot that we're not actually projecting into any of the neighbors' front yard or backyard, and that has been acknowledged by the city. And you can see the house is aligned with the neighbor's house, the backside is aligned with the neighbor's house, so not projecting into the privacy of any of the neighbors. It's just the square footage that we couldn't meet. And if you look at the front elevation as well, we just extended the garage further to take advantage of the extra wide lot, but technically we can bring the garage back to align with the house, and that becomes a very generous setback from here to there. We're adding 6 foot to the setback.
And I was looking specifically at how it transitions from what's here to there. I mean, I can see all those points because you mentioned them in the beginning, but again,
So if you drive by,
anything
you can
else
see,
you want to add to that? Because that seems to be it's a more subjective discussion than perhaps an
I'm saying
objective one.
if we were not here for the area, we could have went straight to the permit
Right.
with this mass, with these setbacks required, and we are actually meeting every bylaws. So it's just because we asked for this extra footage, suddenly the mass doesn't fit in the area.
Yes.
So it's not really.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, just before you go, is there anyone here that has an interest in application CAV 005-2017 on 134 Miller Road? Yes, sir. If you want to come forward, Mr. Kalini, if you can just have a seat there and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm James Greer, and I live at 139 Oakdale Drive, which partially backs onto this subject land. And I know my neighbors to my extreme left back directly onto the subject property. Even though we do we have, you got my letter?
We have
Okay.
your email,
I was just wondering if you received that on
yes.
time.
And your neighbor is,
Is it 141?
okay, and we also have
And
something
that's,
from a neighbor at 145, so,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that you received our letter.
Yes.
And that if there was anything more, I guess, to add.
Yeah, no, if you want to provide us with your brief summary, we have read it, we understand your
Okay,
position.
thank you.
Okay, is there any questions? We have Mr. Greer reading his letter, which was quite succinct, and so one of the dilemmas I'm having is there's no height variance, and there's no side yard variance,
Yeah,
and it's just a question of massing. So the one
Yeah.
thing that always troubles me with that is if, for example, the applicant decided to reduce the massing of the building from the rear, which I think he just indicated that if I was to reduce the massing from the rear or the side or whatever it is, then he wouldn't need,
It wouldn't
he
need
could
a
go right
permit,
to a permit.
or to
You know,
adjustment.
so a lot of the arguments on massing, it's almost like, I'm just trying to,
yeah, I guess it's more to the point of in the melding in with the neighborhood. And I know north of Miller Street and even further north there are a number of houses, single level homes that are being demolished, and these big 2-story houses being put in there in place. Some of them tend to meld into the environment a little better. In this particular case, I'm thinking that it's all single level homes, all on Miller Street, and there are no 2-story homes there except further down towards 6th Line.
but the zoning bylaw permits 2-story homes.
I understand that.
You know, so it's sort of,
So if he didn't want to adjust the side width,
right,
he
I know,
was still within
what I
the,
think the architect said, and I apologize, what he said was if I wasn't here seeking slightly more area within the home, then I could build the height that I'm suggesting. I can build it with the side yards I'm suggesting, and the way you would see it, it would not be altered. In other words, he can shave some area in the
True.
back and make it comply, and I'm just
Yep.
trying to, you know, in the balance of the arguments, keeping in mind that the height's permitted and the setbacks are, you know, have been satisfied.
okay.
That's sort of what I'm gonna ask our planner the same question, because I'm just having trouble with this. Okay, thank you for
Okay,
your time.
thank you.
Any questions of, so, Ms. Mihaljevic? So you say, or someone says in the paragraph, the proposed dwelling does, it says, while the proposed dwelling maintains a front yard setback and does not project into established rear yard of the abutting dwellings, the proposed massing and scale dwelling would be out of character with the neighborhood. So in the same sentence, that we have the proposition that we meet the zoning bylaw, but it's out of character, and it's sort of, I'm trying to grapple with the concept that you heard me express with Mr. Greer. How do you balance that? You're allowed a two-story, you're meeting the side yard setbacks, yet you're asking for a transition to a one-story home, which, is perhaps in character with the neighborhood, but it's not, not everyone needs to build a two-story home because you're permitted, but if someone comes forward and meets the zoning bylaw, I'm trying to balance the arguments here.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee. This particular application is respective of residential floor area. This is not a request for an increase in height or setbacks. We understand that. But again, when we're looking at evaluating the application with respect to the 4 tests, we have to respond to the test under the official plan that speaks to the preservation of neighborhood character. And as provided in our comments, we acknowledge that there is a specific character in this area where there is an existing condition of generous side yard setbacks. So the buildings that are there today did not build to the full extent of the bylaw with respect to the side yard setbacks. And there is also a general transition in terms of each of the building forms that we're seeing in this neighborhood, albeit majority of them are one-story. They all have unique features about them. When we're evaluating the application with respect to floor area, the bylaw allows for 41%. The applicant is seeking more than that, which triggers our review of the OP and the neighborhood character. And by commenting on areas where the floor area could in fact be reduced by providing generous side yard setbacks or providing transitional building elements, that would by virtue allow for a smaller building that would fit more with the character of the neighborhood. That is where our comments are coming from when we're looking at a variance for an increase in floor area.
So, and when you talk about the out of character, I'm assuming you're talking about what you see walking the public realm, the street.
Through you,
Because,
Mr. Chairman.
because the rear yard, it complies with the rear yard, so there's no intrusion in people's rear yard, right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, when we look at neighborhood character, we are looking at all facets of that neighborhood, which includes what is happening in the rear yard amenity areas, what the orientations of buildings are and their relationships to each other, and what it does look like from the public realm. We've provided our comments as to where we felt there would be opportunities to reduce the massing by reducing further reducing the side yard setbacks, or rather increasing the side yard setbacks, and providing smaller building elements within the 2-story form to act as transitional to the 1-story dwellings that are beside them. This could occur at the front, at the rear, at the sides. It would be up to the applicant to interpret that fully. It's not our responsibility to redesign the proposal as it's presented to us, but merely comment on the areas that we feel could be improved.
So, but you're saying, this is my last question. You're suggesting that it's not in character, or you can better reflect the character by providing generous side yard setback or a transition and build form. So the generous side yard, it meets the bylaw requirements, so you're asking them to go more than the bylaw, more than the minimum. Recognizing the side yard is a minimum standard, not a maximum standard, right?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may clarify further, the requested increase in floor area, in order to be more in character, needs to come from somewhere.
So what happens if the applicant decides to take it from the rear yard?
If the applicant chooses to take it from the rear yard, Mr. Chairman, and comply with the bylaw, then we don't have the opportunity to then evaluate the proposal in relationship to the stable residential urban design guidelines. This is our opportunity to evaluate these applications when they're asking for more.
I see.
When we're looking at an increase in floor area, as Mr. Charlebois has already stated, it's a subjective review. Based on the character of this neighborhood, we felt that it would be more in keeping if the dwelling provided more generous setbacks along the side yards and provided traditional or transitional building elements to the one-story dwellings on either side.
Okay, thank you. Any questions arising from that? Thank you. Sir, is there anything you wish to add? And then we'll take this matter to committee.
I'm just responding to her comments. I'm just, that's what I'm trying to propose. If the question is to reduce the mass of the house, then I can bring the garage line further back in, and that will give, add 1.8 meter extra to the setback, which is on top of the 1.5 meter we
But
have
see,
already.
here's the problem. We're not in the business of
Yeah,
negotiating.
exactly, I
You
understand
know, we're
that.
not mediators. We're decision makers on
Yeah.
variances. So this is your call, what you wish to do. If you wish to, you know, have that opportunity to have that discussion, by all means. But we're here to deal with your application. And,
Okay.
and I think, in fairness, you've known what the concern was. You should have reached out to planning staff in advance, you know, and made that suggestion, not on the floor, because it doesn't give us an opportunity. Now we're going to have to go around the loop again.
Agree,
And
but
we don't know whether that's satisfactory or not. Like, we're just speculating. So
Okay.
we'll deal with this application that's before us. And I guess in the future, if you have these kind of offers to make, they should be made in advance.
well, I mean, the comment just came in yesterday, so we didn't have time to come and talk to the planners. And we know we're meeting every bylaws except the area, so we're actually exceeding all
We
the
understand.
bylaws. Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Thank you. I'm just debating whether I should ask this question or not, but I'm going to anyways. You saw what the applicant suggested. Would that be in line with what you had, perhaps, you know, we're not in the business of redesigning, but would that head in the right direction in your view?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I can submit to you and the committee, the purpose and intent of the comments that are provided by staff are generally intended to reduce the variance requested.
Right, okay, and that doesn't do it. That just reduces, that increases the side yard. Gotcha. Okay. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Charlebois, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, having considered the materials here, as well as I note that there were 3 letters of objection from the public, and listening to the presentation of the applicant's agent here, as well as the comments from planning, I guess when I'm looking at something like this, I do note that under our requirements here, we have 4 tests that we have to look at. And the criteria is that it has to meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act. And a lot of times in the presentation here, we concentrate on 1 or 2 of the tests, and you know, it seems to comply with there. But the difficulty with this one here, from the town's point of view, and I think even from the comments from the neighbors, is I believe falls under the one, does the application conform to the general intent of the official plan? And I note in here that basically that the built form of development, including scale, height, massing, architectural character, and materials, is to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And we go into discussions a little bit on character, neighborhood, transition. And I think the difficulty here is when you have a neighborhood that really hasn't gone under transition and you're the first one coming in, it's always tough. If there were a bunch of other buildings here that had sort of, you know, already built to the full extent of the bylaw, it would be easier for you. What you have is a situation here, I believe, that we've seen before, which even if you built to the bylaw, your building doesn't fit the character, but as planning mentioned, they can't say anything because that's, you fall within the rules. So I'm going to put forward a motion to deny this application, feeling under the idea that it does not conform to all 4 tests under the Planning Act.
Okay, is there a discussion on a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one comment to make with respect to where the deductions would go on that design. If we push the applicant to make the reduction simply by what he has suggested, cutting off the garage, it'll just make the house look like a big box. There will be no transition, and that will be lost in terms of the effects that we're looking at from an urban design perspective. I think that if what we want is for the effectively the gross floor area to decrease, then there has to be a way potentially that the client can do so while respecting the design elements rather than just taking the corner off and cutting corners as we say just to meet that bylaw. So I think there's more here to really look at further to what my colleague was speaking about.
Okay, any further discussion? Mr. Tulowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like my colleague, I too am having difficulty with this application, but I think it's from a different perspective. It's a 250 square foot variance on a 3,500 square foot house. If you took 250 square feet off this house, I suspect the planning's comments would still be the same. They'd still say the house is out of character and doesn't fit the neighborhood, and by definition that would mean that the zoning bylaw doesn't comply with the official plan. And I really struggle with that that kind of logic. So I'm just not sure I can support the motion because I can't support the rationale being used to deny the application.
Any further discussion? See none, okay, the recommendation is to refuse application CAB 005-2017 at 134 Miller Road. Those in support? Those opposed? Okay, so that motion fails. Mr. Tulowski, did you want to continue with that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think a lot of it's been said. It's one variance. We're not increasing the building envelope, increasing the height. Yes, it could be argued that the applicant is maximizing the standards of the zoning bylaw, but I always believe the test needs to be considered in, does the variance cause the perceived impact? And I don't believe the variance causes the impact in this sense. The zoning bylaw permits a house to be built that is arguably out of character with the existing neighborhood, but I don't believe that the 250 roughly square feet being asked for here is causing that to be the case. So, Mr. Chair, I'll move the application be approved as applied for, recognizing that there were 3 letters of opposition, but again, I don't believe the impacts that are being expressed by the neighbors are being caused by the variance, and I'd make the approval subject to the building permit issuing within 2 years and the dwelling being constructed in general accordance with the drawings provided.
Discussion on a recommendation. Mr. Charlebois will note your dissent on it. See none. All those in support of the motion? Those opposed? Mr. Charlebois, for the reasons he cited earlier. Thank you. Your application has been approved, sir. CAVA 006-2017 at 568 Wellington Crescent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the committee. My name is Raid Al-Rawi from Professional Floor Plans. We are the designers of the property.
Thank you. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 006-2017 at 568 Wellington Crescent? See none. Their staff are recommending approval. Members, do you have any questions, items of clarification? You've done your site visit, read the staff report, familiar with the application. Should we proceed with the application, or is there a need for presentation?
Can I just ask one question of planning? You made a point in your staff report of talking about, which I don't normally see, of talking about the sunroom and saying specifically that your comments are strictly reflective of the front porch. I don't normally see you worry about things like that, so I was wondering why.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee members, staff have acknowledged that sometimes a development proposal might be put forward that doesn't essentially have an effect of a variance. So should the applicant choose to reduce the size of that sunroom or increase the size of that sunroom that would not otherwise require any further variances, I don't think it would be appropriate to penalize the applicant for making those types of changes for an item that's not in front of this committee for their consideration. So it was just a point of identifying that the items in front of this committee for consideration were the front porch. Should the applicant choose to build a sunroom or other form of addition, they would not be subject to come back to this committee for a variance because it didn't match the plans you're reviewing this evening.
Okay. Thanks.
Any further questions? Is there anything you wish to add to the application? We're ready to proceed. Who would like to move a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle.
yeah, having reviewed the materials and undertaken my site visit, and I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions. The first being that the proposed porch be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated December 7th, and that the approval will expire within 2 years. Not having received any input from members of the public, I would note that, please.
Any discussion on recommendation? See none. The recommendation is to approve subject to those two conditions. All those in support? No one opposed. The application being approved, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, application CAV 007, 2017 at 3212 Ribble Crescent. Good evening, sir. Name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Gus Ricci. I'm the architect and agent representing the clients at 3212 Ribble Crescent.
I would have thought you would introduce yourself as James Bond 007.
I thought about that.
I
Like
knew
a
you
shot
did.
down. I didn't even realize that.
Okay.
I didn't.
So, is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAV 007, 2017 at 3212 Ribble Crescent? See none. Members, again, I'm in your hands if you wish a presentation of this application. You have any items of clarification? We've done our site visit, studied the application. We're familiar with it. Sir, is there anything you wish to add?
No, I don't.
Okay. So, members, Mr. Charlebois?
I'm going to ask a question again of planning, and I apologize. I wrote some notes here, but I can't exactly see where it was in here. But you seem to make the argument that the building can just be larger because the bylaw kind of got it wrong. And so we can just make the building larger. But I'm going to apologize because I know I read it all. Lots one of the larger. I'm saying the variance request for a larger increase was a request staff has been in the context of the site. The proposed additional floor area of 35.67 is minor. Again, it's not something I'm accustomed to hearing from you where let's just make, just because the building can be bigger, let's just make it bigger. Usually you've got some more arguments about this.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee, I don't believe that was our approach. We just merely wanted to break down the variance requested, as it appeared quite misleading to us initially when we reviewed the application. As you will notice, the variance as listed on the notice indicates an increase of over 100 square meters of floor area, which we didn't quite understand when we started to fully look at the application, look at the history of the zoning from the inception, when the subdivision was initially approved. It occurred to us that there was a discrepancy with the new bylaw coming in and not adjusting for the change in how we measure for residential floor area. So once we were able to identify where that extra floor area was coming from, since it was not a result of what was actually being proposed, that allowed us to put ourselves in a frame of mind to then assess 35 square meters of additional floor area. And it was under that assessment that we took the position that the impacts and the neighborhood character here felt that 35 square meters of additional floor area onto that existing building was considered to be minor and appropriate for the development of the property.
Okay, and I found, thank you for that, and I found the comment, that's what you get for reviewing this like 2 weeks ago and then making this note. The former bylaw measured it in a certain way, and the new bylaw just missed it, didn't get it. So in actual fact, can I make the statement that if other people in the area start coming forward with the same things in here, you're going to approach it the same way and just say, you know what, I think we might have gotten it wrong with this new bylaw, and we should look at it differently?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the committee, staff has already acknowledged that there is the discrepancy with the bylaw, and it has been put forward to our team of staff that are doing the housekeeping amendments currently. Okay. And this is one of the items that will be captured to better reflect the proper measuring under the current bylaw for these RL8 zones, which have this issue. That being said, until such time as that's actually in place, we can at least identify any discrepancy that may exist with an existing condition and what the variance might request, and then continue as we normally would on a case-by-case basis, evaluate any change from an existing condition to something new as whether or not that would be an appropriate variance. I don't see this application as setting any sort of precedent with respect to other proposals in this neighborhood or other RL8s that would have the same issues. I think it's still on a case-by-case basis, but it gives us that background to understand that if there is a large discrepancy between the bylaw and what's actually being proposed, we know where it's coming from.
And so right now, am I led to understand that there is a, let's call it a study or a discussion within planning that maybe they'll clean up the language in this thing and so that this won't occur like this again?
Yes, through you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to the committee, as I indicated or tried to indicate in the comments, they only did it partially. They upped the percentage value. They
Yeah.
did not up the floor area square meter value. So there's a proper way of calculating what that translates in 2014-14
Okay.
language versus 1984-83 language.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Okay.
So, and this is a situation where the bylaw rendered a certain aspect of the building non-compliant, but there's an addition that's proposed to it, and we're bringing the non-compliant building and the new addition into conformity with the bylaw as it exists today.
That is correct.
Okay. Anything you wish to add, sir?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none? Okay, we'll take this matter to committee. Who would like to move a recommendation? Ms. McHale, thank you.
Can get it to work, yeah. Mr. Chairman, given this interesting conversation and all the facts, I will move a motion to approve the application as set before us. I find that it has met the 4 tests of the planning as well as the official plan. And I will make it subject to approval expiring within 2 years from the date of the decision if a development has not proceeded and/or building permit not issued, as well as our standard condition for the construction to be in accordance with the plans as submitted. I'm not sure what the date was. Let me
As
just-
submitted with the application.
Yes, as submitted with the application is fine,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Discussion on our recommendation? Mr. Charlebois?
I'm going to support this motion, Mr. Chairman, but I just wanted for the record to say that I'm swayed by the comments from planning staff that in looking at this, the way the zoning is written here, that they see an inherent error and that they're looking at trying to rectify it in the future.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, recommendations to approve subject to those 2 conditions. All those in support? And no one opposed. Your application's been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll deal with the application CAVA 88-2017 at 1173 Morrison Heights Drive. Yes, Mr. Kyle. Should we allow the applicant to introduce himself? And I think you want to add something on this application?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir, name and address for the record?
Jason Heater, 22 Tolton Drive, Guelph.
Jason, sorry?
Jason Heater.
Okay, do you have that?
Yes. From Hicks Design.
Oh, you're, okay, Hicks.
Oh, so then you're Hicks Design, you're not personally sending this to your house?
No, he's with Hicks Design, okay, thank you.
Yes.
So you're at 200 Suite 295 Robinson Street,
That's
Oakville?
correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just before you proceed, Ms. McHale has something to say.
Ms. Mihaljevic, thank you,
Mihaljevic, yes.
Mr. Chairman.
You two have to stop changing your names on me.
Thank you. Through you to the committee, staff would like to acknowledge before the item proceeds further that we had received some additional information that has changed our advice and comments for you this evening. Staff initially had some concerns with respect to variance number 3, which would seek a reduction in the front yard setback from 11.2 meters to 10.5 meters. Staff's concern with respect to this particular variance was the impact to an existing tree, which is at the front of the property and is considered to be a character-defining feature of the neighborhood. The applicant has provided staff with an arborist report that has indicated that that particular tree is actually in a state of poor health and is intended to be removed. Staff have evaluated that and would agree with the findings of the arborist, and as such, we would now have no concerns with respect to that variance, and we would submit to you that staff would support the application as submitted.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Let's just see, is there anyone here this evening have an interest in application CAVA 008-2017-1173 Morrison Heights Drive? Okay, sir, given that change in circumstance, which I think you agree, because you probably submitted the arborist report.
That's correct.
Is there anything further you wish to add to the application?
No, I don't believe that there is. No.
Members, you have any questions, any items of concern, any items of clarification? Seeing none? Okay. Well, we'll take this back to committee. Simplified things a bit, I believe. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Hardcastle?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I want to thank staff for their clarification. That was helpful. In light of that additional information, I'm prepared to put forward a motion of approval of all 5 variances, subject to the 2 standard conditions of first, that the plans be in accordance with the plans as submitted, and the second, that the approval will expire within 2 years. And I would note that there were no submissions made from members of the public with respect to this.
Okay, is there a discussion on that recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support? No one opposed, your application has been approved.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're now dealing with application CAVA 2010-2016 at 108 John Street. Hi there, name and address for the record.
Julie Thompson, 108 John Street. And Kate McManus, 108 John Street.
Okay, welcome. Is there anyone here this evening that has an interest in application CAVA 2010-2016? It's, I guess, a leftover from last year regarding the property at 108 John Street. Okay. Members, I'm in your hands. You have any items of clarification, anything of interest that you'd like to explore with the applicants? Is there anything you wish to add to the application? No. It's been a long time, though. Yeah. All right, well, if there are no items of clarification, we'll proceed on a recommendation. Staff proposing approval subject to a condition. Who would like to move a recommendation? Mr. Charlevoix, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, having reviewed the material in front of us, noting here that the town is in agreement, that there are no comments from the public with respect to this application, and having reviewed the material in here, I find that this particular application does meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm going to put forward a motion that it be approved. Just bear with me, because subject to the condition that the proposed addition and partially covered deck be constructed in general accordance with the plans dated November 29th, 2016 is submitted, and subject further to the condition that this approval will expire within 2 years if a building permit is not issued.
Any discussion or recommendation? See none. All those in support? And no one opposed?
So sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, my apologies. That condition is incorrect.
Okay.
That is not the correct condition.
Oh, and I just, you know, and I had to say it all without even taking one breath. I was really struggling.
I
don't think it
apologize,
was-
Mr. Charlevoix. I'm sorry, that condition is incorrect as there is no partially covered deck, and those are not the date of the plans. If I may, Mr. Chairman, the
Yes.
condition should just read that the proposed addition be constructed in accordance with the plans as submitted.
So the proposed addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted.
I accept that change to the motion.
It doesn't really change the nature of the, so again, let's proceed with the recommendation that the proposed addition be constructed in general accordance with the plans as submitted and subject to the 2 years condition. Discussion on the recommendation? See none. All those in support? No one opposed. The application's been approved. No minutes to confirm and adjournment. Who would like to move an adjournment request? Mr. Charlevoix? All those in support? We're adjourned at 8:06. Or thereabouts.